How do you annoy thousands of drivers? Take the name of an off-road vehicle still parked under their forester's lodge and put it on a city crossover. Old, I knew it, you'll say, and you're right. Explorer, Eclipse, S-Space, Puma, you can go on like that. And now Opel has done the same. They've resurrected the Frontera. Opel, just to be clear, still claims that everything is fine, because this car still guards the borders, but not state borders out in the field, just the borders of its segment. It's somewhere on the border between a city car and a family car, on the border between simplicity and modernity, on the border between a combustion engine car and an electric car. And are these the same borders we had in mind with the name Frontera? Judge for yourselves. The new Frontera hasn't really kept to the boundaries of appearance because it's hard to find any references to the old model here. Back then it had boxy proportions, a strong front and a typical off-road silhouette. Today we have Opel's modern stylistic language, a distinctive grille design, a large logo and smooth, very simple lines that you could say are cheap to produce. It lacks a frame and off-road toughness, but has a higher body, decent ground clearance and some rawness in the details, so that it can be written in the catalogue that someone who remembers the old Frontera will definitely see a shadow of that car in this vehicle. Opel offers only a 113 horsepower electric model with standard or extended battery options. I doubt the first one's future since its range is under 300 kilometers, and the second one, with a bigger battery, takes 14 seconds to reach 100. In this context, the more powerful combustion engine we have for testing today feels like a monster that pins you to your seat. The weaker 100 horsepower version with the electric motor has about 110 horsepower, similar to the electric model. The stronger engine has 136 horsepower and with the 28 horsepower electric motor totals about 145 horsepower with a 6-speed automatic, and let's focus on this version. It has 230 Newton meters of torque and per the manufacturer uses just over 5 liters per 100 kilometers. In practice that translates to a little over 6, which I also think is okay for a car that accelerates to 100 in 9 seconds with an automatic transmission. The car can coast on electricity, it does it quite efficiently, and it can also accelerate pretty well somewhere above 2000 revolutions per minute with the turbo. And the only problem. But I'll talk about that while driving. But since we're here, I'll say that the rattle of the 3 cylinders is unfortunately noticeable not only under heavy load on the highway. This narrative on the border of segments is very convenient for Opel because they can promise everything to everyone at the same time, right? If someone sees a city car in this vehicle, they say, yes, it's a city car. Compact size, easy parking, low fuel use. On the other hand, if someone is looking for a raised car like we have here with a B-segment crossover, at the same time we can enjoy sitting high up and seeing everything. We can carry more with this car, and similarly with combining powertrains, we can drive in traffic jams using only electricity, but we also don't have to worry about range like with electric cars because we can just refuel and keep going. But we have to remember that combining these two different worlds is, in practice, sometimes like mixing fire and water. It's really about finding compromises. And you can see this compromise best when you look at the attempt to offer a car that's big, spacious, practical, and at the same time very, very cheap. And that's exactly why I called this film Gentleman's Agreement. Because Opel, when selling this car, says you get this European car with a European dealer network, with European predictable depreciation, no surprises, with a European logo, but at, you could say, a Chinese price. But we make a gentleman's agreement with you. When you get into this car and notice certain cost-cutting shortcuts, you don't complain, you turn a blind eye to it because you paid little. And that's exactly the association I had with this car at first, that it's simply a gentleman's agreement. We pay little and we don't complain. So in this way we have to turn a blind eye to, honestly, the hard plastics, to the very poor soundproofing of the powertrain, which sometimes rattles and other times you can hear the electric motor running even when the car isn't running entirely on electricity. And yet we constantly hear that whining sound of the electric motor at high frequencies. Or when we see that someone decided to shock everyone with some unique solution, that definitely makes this car stand out from other options on the market. And at the same time, they got a budget of about €3 for it. And that's when a solution like this flexible strap comes up, and then they come up with a philosophy that thanks to it you can, for example, carry a tablet or a laptop here. I think the idea is completely off the mark. It's an elastic band that's located by the cup holders. If it turns out that we want to put a toaster or a food processor here, that's been taken into account too. So we can just unclip this and then put something really big in here. Useful, right? I used to put a food processor in here, but it always tipped over. Now that issue is gone. What's more, if it doesn't suit us, we can just take it out and not carry it with us. And then, of course, we all pretend that the holes left after removing that strap don't bother us at all. Inside, Opel's new design features simple horizontal lines, minimal embellishments, and a detoxed interface, as the company describes. We also see something here that Opel calls the Pure panel, which means two 10-inch screens with the one on the right clearly angled toward the driver. Interestingly, I found that in the base version, this car can come with what's called a smartphone station, meaning the control center is basically taken over by your phone. But that's the cheapest option. In real configurations, whether press cars or customer cars, we'll usually see the full duo of two displays. The steering wheel has a simple, actually new design, and it fits well with the technical, simple aesthetic of this car. My friends, this episode's partner is MUBIPL, a popular tool for finding cheap insurance. It compares offers from various companies and ranks the best and most affordable options for you. When you buy through MUBIPL/Zakar and get a policy, you can receive 100 zlotys cashback. Check it yourself. After entering your car's details, you'll get a list of offers to choose from. Even if your policy isn't expiring now, you can compare it with what you paid for yours. It might come in handy in the future. The link is in the description, and let's not overpay for insurance. You want proof, you get it. Here's the interior, where you won't find any soft materials. Here on the console it's hard, below it's hard. Here you see we have a pattern that might suggest otherwise, but no, it's hard. Lower down it's obviously hard. Here, for a change, it's hard everywhere, even on the doors up here, where I'd normally reach to check if it's soft or hard. I can save myself some time, because the plastic makes it obvious from a mile away that it's cheap and hard. The only places where you could say there's anything going on in terms of comfort are here, where we have about 1 millimeter of foam, and here where there are actually quite a few millimeters. This armrest could even be considered comfortable, and we have a quite nice, at least in this trim level, leather-wrapped steering wheel, so in that respect at least it's a little island of good finishing. Oh, we've got that, and when it comes to the fit and finish, it's just as unimpressive. Here the screen doesn't tilt. Here it doesn't really tilt either. But for example, this little microvisor, look, what an innovation, right? We theoretically have a screen. Everyone misses those old-fashioned or classic visors, call them what you want. So they made this little visor above the screen for about 22.5 euro cents. Why not? Here we can tug on it, and surprisingly nothing happens here too, because it really looks cheap, but it doesn't make any noise. Not here either, and not here, and not here, and not here either. So in terms of, let's say, how this was put together, I'd say someone put much more effort into this than when they were choosing the finishing materials. But like I said, there's a deal, it's cheap, so I'm not complaining. And now it's time for the 2-meter guy test. I'll start with good news, I'll end with good news, but in the middle it won't be all that positive. So yeah, above my head there's plenty of space, you can see it from the outside. After all, this car is tall, and that's to be expected. However, the steering wheel is disappointing, especially the steering column, since it only adjusts slightly. Look, from you to you, it's only a few centimeters, while the up and down adjustment is useless for me. That's because it's an old-fashioned ignition where you insert the key, and in any position other than the highest one, the key rests on my knee. So, to avoid breaking it, I have to raise the steering wheel all the way up. And that way it turns out that I can't get any closer to the steering wheel because my knee is already hitting the hard plastic. So I'm missing a few centimeters to properly position myself in relation to the steering wheel. So that's the bad news, but the good news at the end is that Opel has come up with a new type of seat. No one has done this before in this segment or class. Well, the seat has been divided into two parts, and in the middle there's this extra groove, whatever you want to call it. And as a result, sitting on such a chair is more comfortable, ergonomic, and improves circulation. You'll also find some examples of a gentleman's agreement at the back, and here we see the lack of air vents, and we see there's no storage compartment in the middle. Of course, we have pockets behind the seats, and we have very modest symbolic pockets in the doors. The rear bench is an even better proof of this gentleman's agreement, and so there's a lot of car here because we have plenty of headroom. There's still plenty of space in front of my knees. After all, the seat in front of me is adjusted for me, and there's also enough room for my feet. And in this way, you could say that the car is really big, not only in the front, but also in the back. On the other hand, of course, the plastics are completely hard. Here and there you can see bare metal, fortunately painted, but you also won't find any cup holders here because there's no armrest. But on the other hand, they didn't forget about things like lights, or a 12-volt outlet, or even a double outlet. This is actually a highly equipped version. We also have a pretty simple, inexpensive solution here when it comes to mounting, hiding the ISOFIX mount behind a zipper, but everything is in this kind of cheap form, but it's there. As for the previously mentioned groove, it's more drawn here than actually sculpted. And this is what Frontera looks like at night. We can see the screen's panel and air conditioning, but unfortunately the buttons aren't backlit above or below, except for this activated button, which only lights up when you turn it on. We have buttons on the steering wheel, a couple of buttons under the steering wheel, on the doors, but there's no backlighting for any handles or pockets here. Let's check the glove compartment in front of the passenger. No, let's check the sun visor. No, and that's basically it on the subject. As far as lighting goes, we don't have ambient lights here either, so that's the end of the topic. Let's take a look in the trunk, and right away there's a big improvement compared to the Mokka, where you had to unlock the hatch in one place and reach somewhere else to open it. Here the opening button is right on the hatch. Simple things, but they make you happy after a week with the weird solution in the Mokka. What do we have here? A trunk with 460 liters, and let's remember this is a segment B car, so that's not a bad result. But the best part is yet to come, because it turns out that under the floor of this trunk there's not just a compartment but almost the same amount of capacity again, because look, the difference in height here is a good 20 centimeters, I think. At the end there's an additional recess, so the capacity of this compartment makes it qualify as a second part of the trunk. But even better surprises are waiting for us after folding down the rear seat backs, because then Opel already offers 1600 liters, which is clearly above what other cars in the segment offer. Let's remember the bi-SUV segment. Now the driving impression begins on a cobblestone street. Here in Wola there's a perfect testing ground. And I've already shown that I shook everything I could in this car here, and I couldn't get any sound out of it. And now we see how it looks in practice. The car goes into quite noticeable vibrations. However, recently I drove here in a Cayman Gran Turismo 4 Rennsport, and I could barely see or feel anything at all. Yes, everything was shaking. Now, despite everything, the comfortable suspension handles these stones quite well, but most importantly, it's quiet, peaceful. So you could say that in the first seconds of the test drive, we're immediately thrown into the deep end, and we find out that the suspension handles these small bumps. There's another side to this coin, and secondly, the fit and finish of the elements is at a good level, which I already checked earlier by tugging on the plastics. However, what I said is the flip side of the coin. It's about the moose test, which with this very comfortable suspension, significant ground clearance, and generally with a car that's a bit raised up, well, it could have turned out anyway, and each of them would have to be accepted as a result. However, from the driver's point of view, to be honest, it felt completely neutral, calm and predictable. The car, yes, it leaned, went to the left, went to the right, the tires didn't even squeal much, and overall I was quite satisfied with the car while driving. However, later when I watched the footage, I saw that the right rear wheel lifted quite a bit. So, even though from the driver's point of view it might not have looked that bad, you could see that such a maneuver wasn't that easy for such a comfortable suspension. I already mentioned earlier about the rather poor soundproofing. Now I'll turn off the ventilation completely so it's quiet. I don't know if the microphone will pick it up, and maybe here in the underground parking lot you'll hear all those extra electric sounds even better. Let's try. Yeah, that's what it sounds like in reverse. Something changed. This is forward gear. Hear that? Everything works just like a tram. It has now fully demonstrated its howling capabilities. You could hear it even over the sound of the combustion engine. And coming back to the 3 cylinders, you could say that if you listen closely, most of the time you'll hear that there are 3 cylinders in there. But for it to really bother someone, I don't think so. You really have to speed up. You really have to press the gas hard for that rattling sound to become more pronounced during most of the drive. In city driving, if someone wants to hear it, of course they'll hear it, but for it to be bothersome, not really. A very good aspect of this mild hybrid is the fact that 28 horsepower is enough to feel the immediacy of the response when you start accelerating. As soon as you press the gas, you don't have to wait for the engine to rev up. You get an immediate push forward. Maybe like now, I'm driving almost 50. I press the gas and it's not as noticeable, but at lower speeds you can clearly feel that the initial reaction comes from the electric motor, and only later does the combustion engine kick in. I won't drag out this part with driving impressions too much. I'll just say that it's quite pleasant to drive in the city because the steering resistance is very low, so as they say, you could steer it with just one finger. At the same time, it's not completely effortless, so let's say it's set right at the edge of lightness so you can still feel something. And I think that's just right for the potential buyer of this kind of car. And finally, if someone is interested in the version with an automatic transmission, you could say that most of the time it will work in line with the driver's expectations. However, if we drive a bit more aggressively, well, once or twice it happened to me that I had to wait for it for a moment. Wait. There's no way to change gears or interfere with its decision here, so you just have to give it some time. And that's basically it when it comes to the driving impressions, which I think, considering the expectations of customers for such a big car at such a modest price, are completely sufficient for everyday driving. When evaluating this car, you have to detach yourself from its name. The name is what it is. Some will like it, others may be annoyed, but that's just about emotions or associations. The car itself is really worth considering separately from its name, from what some would call baggage. And here, Frontera turns out to be an example of an SUV built with the idea that the Chinese won't take our customers with low prices, right? It's built on the border of segments, sometimes on the edge of compromises, kind of like a gentleman's agreement, as I mentioned. It's not perfect, but it's cheap, and that's what works. As I'm recording this video, just yesterday I saw online that Stellantis was boasting that their sales have been growing for 4 months in a row. Now that's how you should view the Frontera without sentimentality, since what matters is what it offers and its price, not its name. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and see you in future videos. Bye.